Welcome to the Narrator Roundtable. I'm Kirt Graves. In the coming weeks, our audience will learn a lot about the Narrator Roundtable's 5 rotating permanent hosts. But before we dive into the important, thought-provoking, and potentially contentious hot topics that we thought deserved our attention, let's get to know each of our hosts a little better. Joining me today is my co-host, Lindsey Dorcus. Hi, Lindsey.
Hi, Kirt.
Welcome to your interview for our podcast.
So excited. Can't wait.
I was lucky enough to meet Lindsey at the 2019 APAC in New York City at the Javits Center, first thing in the morning at the newbie meet and greet. And honestly, I think it's probably the best thing I got out of APAC.
That's very flattering. Thank you, Kirt.
Well, having a friend who was in the same place at the same time, career-wise, and learning, somebody to learn beside and somebody to complain beside and somebody to go to for advice who I knew wasn't going to judge me and wasn't going to, turn their nose up at me if I asked a silly question. That has been so valuable. And also, you're delightful. So that has been so much fun in the many times we have gotten to talk since then, and the few times we've actually gotten to hang out in person since then as well.
Yeah, thank you. You're one of my favorite things from APAC 2019 too. I should have said that right up front.
Go APA for actually doing something nice for us. Because putting us in the same place at the same time really did. That was good. That newbie meet and greet, if anybody's out there thinking, should I do that? I say yes.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, meeting other narrators in person or virtually, if that's the better option for you. But connecting with other narrators is so valuable for a myriad of reasons.
Yeah. So, just to introduce yourself to our audience a little bit, can you tell me more about where you're from and how you got into this work?
Sure. I grew up in New Hampshire, so I lived out in New England all my life, which is not that exciting, but that's where I grew up. And then I came out to the Chicago area for college, and I studied theater at Northwestern up in Evanston, which I don't count as Chicago. It's a suburb.
Listen, it's a touchy subject for people.
I know. The Chicagoland borders get wider and broader every year.
Right.
But I loved it. I'm a total nerd, and I got to nerd out about theater and storytelling and all those things there, and it was fantastic. And then after I graduated, I moved to Chicago, and I was doing theater work here. I was live theater for the most part. I did a little bit of films, student film stuff, but I was very theater focused. I really liked immersive theater and fourth wall breaking theater and theater for young audiences and all the weird stuff I tended to get into. And so then I was doing that for 10 years, and then also working a million other jobs, because obviously doing non-equity theater in Chicago is not going to pay your rent on its own.
The weird stuff is rarely commercially successful.
Right? Why wasn't my dream to be on a CW show? Which
Right?
was the thing in the 2010s for people my age who were acting, and I was like, I need to do weird stuff in a warehouse somewhere. So that was my great economic plan. But I loved it. I did lots of weird plays in warehouses and basements, and also theaters, also actual theaters. Mm-hmm. And I worked a bunch of jobs. I worked retail, I nannied, I taught a bunch of things. I used to be a circus performer for a short amount of time, and I taught circus, aerials to people. So I was doing 5 million things and running myself ragged. And then in I want to say 2016, 2017, something like that. Maybe it was even a little bit earlier. I started listening to fiction podcasts. Someone recommended Welcome to Night Vale to me. And I started listening to that show, and I was like, this is amazing. I remember specifically walking along the Chicago River and getting to the end of the first episode where they talk about the lights above the Arby's. And I was just seeing it in my mind. And I was like, this is a brand of storytelling that I've never really considered before. Because unlike a lot of audiobook narrators, I was not somebody who's I listened to audiobooks as a child. My grandmother had fun children's story records that we would play and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I'd heard people tell stories, but I wasn't a big audiobook person. I was a big book person. But listening to Welcome to Night Vale, like, because I'd also heard like nonfiction podcasts, like interview podcasts and This American Life and stuff like that before. But listening to this fiction podcast, I was like, oh, this is incredible. And then I listened to Alice Isn't Dead, which is also by the same people and stars Jessica Nicole as this trucker looking for her missing wife. And listening to that, I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to do this. I want to tell stories like this. I want to talk right into people's ears. I want to be with them on their commutes and on their walks and on their whatevers. And that's when I then started like, oh, well, audiobooks is like the big way people do that. And I started like listening to more audiobooks and researching that and like looking into what that takes. Yeah. And so then I just started researching classes and stuff, both in my area and virtual that I could take. And being like, how do I take all these many, many years and expensive school that has trained me to be a stage actor? And how do I take those skills and like move them into this new medium?
Right.
Yeah. And that's how I got started. That's a very long story of how I got started.
It's not really. Actually, it makes it has several steps that make perfect sense to me. Circus performer to audiobook narrator is like, I mean,
The pipeline.
if I
The
had a nickel for
pipeline.
every time I heard that, I would have 5 cents. But no, honestly, this is part of why it's so fun to meet other narrators, because hearing other people talk about the work we do and what they like about it is often the thing that reminds me what I like about it. And so, like, even just listening to you talk about like how much Night Vale grabbed your attention, I'm like, that's right. That's the power of storytelling and the power of audio storytelling. And like, that is why I like this so much. And even on days like today, and I know tomorrow, where like I have so much to get done and it can feel so draining, like, that's going to be an extra little boost for me now, because like, I'm going to be reminded that like, yes, this is so much fun. And there's somebody on the other end who might be walking by the Chicago River, listening to this story and loving it and falling in love with storytelling. So this is part of why we're doing this podcast, but also just why it's so important to spend time with other narrators, talk to other narrators, because like that fire, it's not always kindled, for me at least. And
Yeah.
other
I mean,
narrators help to kindle it.
it can be tough when you're alone in your booth for hours and you're talking to somebody, but you can't see them or hear them. And they're going to hear the thing that you're doing like months from now or years from now, like depending on
Yeah.
when they listen to it. And that's magical in its own way, right? Like I'm telling this story across time and space, but also like,
Ooh,
but
I
also,
like it.
like there's nobody in the room with me, which was that was the toughest adjustment for me from theater, was like that loss of immediate and in-person collaboration and immediate audience feedback. Like I miss being able to look people in the eyes when I'm telling a story.
Yeah.
But then I just have to imagine that they're here in my booth with me and be like, you're going to get it later. It's coming. It's coming to
Yeah.
your little ears.
So one of the things we bonded over was our love of telling queer stories. So I know that is an element that you love to narrate, but like, what are the other genres or stories that you're really attracted to?
Yeah. I have a pretty broad swath of things that I really like to um, narrate, especially. One thing that really surprised me is I really enjoy narrating horror, at least certain types of horror. I mean, I still have stuff that's kind of, each story is its own thing, but
Mhm.
I'm such a baby about watching or consuming horror on my own. I can do it in certain mediums and in small doses, but getting to tell the stories, getting to be in the driver's seat is
Mm.
so fun. Because I like playing with tension and timing. I really like unlikable characters. I like murky, morally gray characters. And I like circumstances that are not like always clear. Like there's not always a good, clear, good choice, which
Yeah.
feels so relatable in our daily human lives. So, and the feeling of something being like strange, that tension of something feeling strange or off, um, is so fun to play with. And I think it's especially fun in like an audio space because it can be such an immersive a medium.
Yeah.
But I also like, I mean, but I also like love a good rom-com, like with like really great snappy banter. I love stories that play with form. So like I would fucking kill to do a story that's written in the second person. Because those are some of my favorite fiction podcasts where it's like,
Sure.
I become the character you're talking to. I just listened to the latest series from the latest season from Within the Wires, which is another Night Vale branded podcast that I love. And like the name of the character is introduced in like the second episode. They keep calling you Brian, and I'm like, I'm Brian. You're talking to me. It's me, Brian.
Yeah.
But I would love to do a book written in second person and being like, you, what do you think about? Like, I'm telling this to you, and cast the audience as another character that I get to talk to. Yeah. And so and I love short stories. I love that, like that compact format, and the writing is usually like so great and like so dense and tasty. And like, you have to be so economical, but like, so yeah, like it's just, there's something about them that every time I get asked to work on a short story collection, I'm like, ooh, what little treat will I have this time?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
That is fun. Plus, it
And
feels so
I could go on and
productive.
on. You also, yes, you're like, I did the whole thing in like a day.
I did the whole thing.
Amazing.
Amazing. And I will shout out to your horror work, because I have listened to a good chunk of one of your books that you did that's horror. And I had to stop because I am not a horror person. And by the time they were like going into the woods for the third time, I was like, no.
Stop it.
Why haven't you learned to stop going into the woods? Nothing good has happened yet.
Get out of there.
Stop it. I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm a wimp. But I have had very limited exposure to like horror as a narrator, but I agree. It is fun when you're in charge.
Yes.
But I'm still a wimp consuming it.
Yeah.
That's me. Me.
Oh, listen, me too. I also like consume very sparingly.
No.
In that genre, because like, yeah. Because if I don't know where it's going, and I like, but that's also why I like horror like Alice Isn't Dead, where like, I don't know, like there's that tension and there's that thrill and there's this element of like something is weird, something is strange, but it's not quite as like in your face gore in terms of like what I consume. That like the higher gore stuff, I'm like, I don't know if that can't surprise me. I got to know it's coming, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to move on to our one big question for you.
Yeah.
So part of our job as narrators really is that we are constantly being asked to sell ourselves and to like extol our best virtues as narrators. I am more interested in like, what are the things about either your life or like who you are as a person that make narrating hard for you? And like, how have you addressed that, and how have you overcome those personal obstacles?
Yeah. Well, one thing that we sort of alluded to earlier is I struggle a bit with the isolation. And while there is like collaboration as part of this, like, right, you're through distance and time, you are working with a proofer, with an engineer, with a producer. Like, you are not the only person in this process. There is a whole team working to bring this audiobook to life. But your interaction with them, for the most part, especially if you're in a home studio, is like through email. And through like sort of sending each other little messages and communicating that way, which is fine. But like, I do sometimes get a little stir crazy and like you said, have to sort of relight that creative spark for myself when I am working by myself.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's also a difference between collaboration and cooperation. Like, we're working with other people, sure. But like, is it a really like creatively collaborative process? A lot of times still no, especially if you're just talking about like proofers, editors, that sort of thing. Like, they are doing their own creative job, but it's totally separate from us.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I just miss like getting that immediate. I've gotten to work with an audiobook director just a handful of times. But it's always been like really interesting and helpful to get that immediate feedback, or to be able to like talk about a moment briefly together. You don't have a ton of time in the studio to really like dig in and let everything marinate, but like, it's so nice to have a real human in real time to be able to be like, oh, should I do it this way or that way? Or like, oh, what do you think she means by this? Or like, what is, or if they're seeing something that I'm not, or vice versa, like that is really energizing. And I sort of have to like provide that own energy for myself when
Yeah.
I'm by myself. And another part of that by myself that's tough is like all of the like small business owner aspects of this, and
Oh
like,
boy.
and making my schedule and keeping to my schedule and staying on top of all those little tasks. And like, am I reaching out to people? Am I, sort of like sending out the tendrils or planting the seeds for future work that might come to me months down the line? Am I also focused on this current work? And am I also like communicating with co-narrators and communicating with, producers that I'm currently working with? And just that like sort of get up and go and motivation to like get in the booth every day that I plan on being in the booth and be in there for a certain number of hours. As much as I love this work, it's still work. And I definitely have days when I don't wanna. I wanna
Yeah.
I wanna like,
Yeah.
I wanna go for a walk and live my life and not, or I'm anxious about like performing that day or whatever. But the thing that makes this a job and not a hobby is that like on those days I have to go, well, you have to. And so you're going to. And so you're going to like do whatever you need to do to get yourself in that booth and just stay in that booth. And, whether that's taking more breaks that day, whether that's stretching or trying a different vocal warm up or like listening to music that sort of puts me in a better mood. Like I have to employ these strategies to like make the thing happen.
Yeah. I find I am still learning how to be better at that. How to
Every day.
just tell myself, you have to do it. Like it took, and there were years where it was like if I wasn't in like the zone or whatever, like if I didn't feel inspired or I didn't feel connected to the text, then I was like, well, that's a sign I'm not supposed to record today. But that was when I had the luxury of like not needing to record full-time hours
Right,
in order to
right,
like
right.
make an income. And then at some point you transition to the point where it's like you need this to be an income, and you can no longer say, I'll just get back to it tomorrow. I'm just not feeling it, you know?
Yeah,
And that's I still like today was one of those days where I had to like stop, tell myself, no, you can't not do this. You
mhm,
just have to keep going. And once I'm in it, I can usually find my way back to being connected to the text and
yeah,
find something to connect to, or find humorous or uh sad. Like I still cry in the booth even on days where I'm like I didn't think I was into it, and suddenly I'm like so there with the character,
yeah.
and I'm like, "Oh, wow." It is like riding a bike. You just have to get on the fucking bike.
Getting on the fucking bike is the hardest part
Yeah.
some days. It just is like getting in the booth, getting like sitting down, pressing record, doing
Mhm.
the thing. And, that's not to say like there are times when, you know, I will like say, okay, I'm struggling today. I got to take an extra break, or I need to like do something to refresh myself so I can give this more of my energy. It's not just about like pushing through at any cost.
Mhm.
But, it's true that there's, unless, you schedule it well, and sometimes that can be hard to do. You can't really just be like, not today.
Right.
Like, like I'm just not in my, um, but it reminds me of like that story with, oh gosh, I went like, is it Sir Laurence Olivier and the young actor who's in is Marathon Man? Oh god, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. No, he's not young anymore. Was it Robert De Niro or was it someone else?
I don't
This
know
is
Marathon
terrible.
Man at all.
Um, but there was like a young actor who was like with Sir Laurence Olivier in this movie, and I guess the character wasn't supposed to sleep for days, and so this actor didn't sleep for days and was like struggling and was like, "This is method. I'm like in it. I got to do it." And he said something like, "Oh my dear boy, try acting."
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes it's so easy for me to get really precious about like, am I in like the exact zone that I need to like deliver the best performance? And sometimes it's just about like, what are the hard skills? What are the like techniques that I can employ? What are the physical or mental things I can do to get the work done to the best of my ability today?
Yeah.
That's not about just like being in like the zone.
Right. But the problem is there are times when it just feels so easy.
Mhm.
Whether it's because the writing is great or you're just like in the zone, whatever that means. Like there are times when like the work comes so easily and you feel so good about it. And I find I'm always chasing that feeling. And that's the thing that I've had to reckon with over the last couple years of being like, it's not always going to be easy, but you
No.
can always be good at it.
Mhm.
Just sometimes you have to work to be good. And other times it's just going to come out of you. And
Yeah.
3 hours in the booth will go by and you'll be like, wow, I got a lot done today. How did that happen? Love those days. I love those days. But they
And then
are
other
not
days you're like,
as numerous.
And then other days you're like, how long have I been in here? 20 minutes?
Yeah.
God damn it. Like, you're like, okay, here we go.
Or it's been 3 hours and how much finished audio do I have?
Oh my
20
gosh.
minutes?
Truly.
What happened? What have I been doing?
I'm like, what happened to the me 3 days ago that was flying? That was just like soaring through this. It's because we're human beings.
Yeah,
and
she doesn't live here right now.
She's gone. She is packed up and left the building, and I'm stuck here plodding on through.
Yes, I know it well. Are there any other struggles that you wanted to talk about?
Those are the big, just like keeping track of everything. Because, I mean, I know people who are so organized, who like are just brilliant at that, who have planners and spreadsheets and systems and and are just like bang, bang, boom. And they can like churn and they can, turn it out over and over again. Beautiful quality, beautiful consistency, just like bam, 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 respond to their emails immediately all the time. And I'm like, how? I feel like there are people who are very good at like that type A organization stuff. And it's a beautiful thing for people who are very good at it. I am not naturally. I am a chaos goblin. I just sort of like roam around and do things by chance. And I'm like, this looks cool. This looks fun. Let's try that. Which works when I am like researching and in the booth, because like researching, I'm just like digging into my little internet burrow and being like, ooh, what's this? Let's follow that thread. Let's figure this out. Oh, there's a reference. Let me like watch a clip. Let me, and so it's just like adding to my little goblin treasure hoard of like thoughts and ideas, which is fun. And same with like when I'm narrating, I'm in the booth, I'm with the text, I'm in that moment with the characters, and I'm getting to like tell a story. So I'm just like having fun doing that. But then when it's like, also, you need to track things and schedule things and like keep up with all these different threads that are going on.
And there are always multiple threads.
There's always multiple threads because I'm so grateful doing this full time, but it means that I'm always prepping multiple books. I'm always recording a book. I'm always like reaching out to try to get future books. Like there's always
waiting on post-production to come through and then having to keep enough of your brain attached to that thing you did 3 weeks ago to be able to bring it back now.
Right? I had 4 pickup packets today, and I was like, they always land all at once? You just like a little...
Why is that?
I don't know. They're all conspiring against us.
They are. There's a Facebook group out there somewhere where they're like, anybody have pickups for Lindsey Dorcus?
And
great, let's all do it on the 4th.
But yeah, so like I do have some systems. I have a giant whiteboard. I like adapted my own version of what Marnie Penning does, or at least I saw her post a photo of once, and I was like, that looks good. That looks visual. That looks like big blocks that I move around with my little goblin hands on a board. I can do that. And I like physical things. Like I try so hard to have like a virtual calendar and stuff like that, but it just becomes, it's in the ether. It's in the web. It's in the World Wide Web. I can't find it. So I have like a big whiteboard with all my projects and like how long they're estimated to be and like what stage of production they're in. And I move the little pieces around to try to like keep up with that and have a visual, which helps. Because then I can look at that and be like, what needs tending to at which point in the process? Who hasn't paid me yet? Who is sending me pickups? Who do I have to prep next? Like all that stuff. But I will be the first to admit that like that does not come to me naturally. And I'm constantly trying to find like new ways that are like simple and visual and tactile to help me stay on top of stuff. I recently heard another great one from Hope Newhouse, because we were talking about following up with publishers and stuff. And that's another thing I'm like, again, kind of goblin-y about. I'm not like, oh, every 8 weeks at this time I do, like I know people who have like every so often, every quarter or whatever, they like send emails out to people on a schedule, or every Friday they do it, or every whatever. And it's like so smart. And they schedule emails in advance, and like, it's so smart, so efficient, probably better than what I'm doing. I'm just like flopping through my life and then going, oh, I haven't talked to that person in a while. I should send them an email. But Hope recently talked about how she uses physical index cards to like keep track of who she hasn't reached out to, and like when, like write down when she last reached out to them, and like keep physical notes on them. And then she can sort of like shuffle, like once they've reached out, she can move it to the back of the stack and like keep sort of going. And I was like, oh, because I've had a poor, neglected, sad little shivering orphan spreadsheet in my Google Docs for years, where like I try to keep up with the best of intentions. And I'm like, I last emailed this person on this day. And then I forget about it, and I email them like 3 more times over the course of the year. And then I go back to my spreadsheet and I'm like, this is all out of date. This is nothing. Yeah. That person doesn't even work there anymore. Like, so I wonder if for me, having like something physical might help bring some order to that chaos too. We'll see.
It's worth a try, right?
Yeah.
Like every strategy is worth a try. And that's so like, it's so great that like narrators do that. Like Marnie and Hope, who are putting their strategies out there and being like, this is what I do. It works for me. It might work for you if you want to try it.
Yeah. And people like Jennifer Jill, I mean, if you're somebody who's like, I need to talk to someone about organization, Jennifer Jill Araya is like incredible. Next level. One of those people who I'm like, you have ascended. Being like and also like a lovely and also a fantastic narrator. Like she's just also very good at the like organization stuff. But yeah, I'm not on that level for that stuff.
So if you're listening to this and you're independently wealthy and feel like being a narrator's personal assistant, it's Lindsey Dorcus at gmail.com.
Oh my gosh. I've even thought about...
Is that right? I made that up.
No, that's right. Okay. It's the benefit of having a weird name that nobody else has is I'm just like, it's just my name. Social media, my email, it's just my name. Just go find me.
Yeah. Thank Dorcus. You, parents, for Kirt with an I.
Yeah.
That really helped on so many fronts. Email, social media, like there's not another one out there that I'm aware of. And he's certainly not doing this. So
I've even thought about looking into, I mean, I don't have the money right now, but even thought about like looking into hiring a personal assistant person. I'm like, I don't even know what I would give them. I don't even know that I would be organized enough to like give them tasks in an effective manner. That's just another person I have to communicate with. No, thank you. I have enough of those. I can't. Yeah.
Very wise to know that though, because some people have tried to do that and didn't realize how much work it is to give someone else work.
Are those people in the room with us right now, Kirt?
They may be. They might be in this chat. They are here.
Great.
They are me. So thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing some of the parts of your journey that aren't easy. I always think that's where the most interesting things can be learned about a person. But also, like we were just talking about, I am sure there are other people out there listening to this going, me too. And it just feels good to know that I'm not alone in some of those struggles. So thank you for that. And thank you for doing this podcast and for all of your contributions and wisdom. You are always somebody who, like, when I am struggling with something, I reach out to because you always bring a valuable perspective that I hadn't thought of. And sometimes just like talking down from the ledge, which is also super necessary sometimes. So thank you.
Man, anytime. And ditto.
So, thank you, listeners, for joining us for this introductory episode of the Narrator Roundtable. If you haven't already, you can subscribe to the podcast anywhere podcasts are available, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible. We have some incredible conversations about our industry and our craft that will be coming to you starting in January 2024. In the meantime, you can learn more about the podcast and find links to our social media at narratorroundtable.com. You can also submit your questions for our panel of hosts and guests. What's on your mind? We want to talk about it. The Narrator Roundtable is produced and hosted by André Santana, Deanna Anthony, Gail Shalan, Kirt Graves, and Lindsey Dorcus. All copywritten material is shared with permission. Music and sound effects are licensed through Storyblocks Audio. All opinions shared are those of the individuals and do not reflect the positions or policies of any company or organization with which they happen to be associated.